Well, welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Sally Blair, Senior Director of Fellowship Programs here at the National Endowment for Democracy. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's presentation, Democracy and Reconciliation in Kyrgyzstan, a Case for the Mobilization of Youth, featuring Regan-Fascell Democracy Fellow, Nadira Eshmatova. We are delighted to have with us as a discussant, former Regan-Fascell Democracy Fellow, Maria Lisitsyna, currently the project manager at the Open Society Justice Initiative in New York. Funded by the U.S. Congress, the Regan-Fascell Democracy Fellows program hosts some of the world's most dedicated democracy activists, scholars, and journalists to conduct independent research and pursue projects here at NED. Now in our 12th year, the program has hosted more than 200 fellows from over 80 countries since its founding in 2001. Within this remarkable group, our speaker today stands out for her unwavering commitment to advancing human rights and reconciliation in Kyrgyzstan. Violent clashes in June 2010 between ethnic Kyrgyz and Uzbek populations of southern Kyrgyzstan and the recent intensification of nationalistic tendencies demand widespread participation in conflict prevention and peace building. As 60% of Kyrgyzstan's population, young people will be integral to future decision-making and policy planning procedures. In view of this, creating formal and informal spaces for youth participation in political life should be prioritized by both the government and the donor community. In her presentation today, Ms. Eshmatova will focus on the challenges facing youth in Kyrgyzstan and how the country's ongoing socio-political transition is shaping opportunities for youth activism. She will suggest ways in which organizations working with youth can ensure that young people are actively involved in the reconciliation and democracy building processes. As the co-founder and executive director of the Youth Human Rights Group, a Bishkek-based non-governmental organization that monitors and reports on human rights abuses in Central Asia, Nadira has developed and facilitated numerous professional trainings for activists, lawyers, and NGO colleagues. She has participated in monitoring the rights of refugee children, orphans, and juveniles in the justice system, taught human rights classes in Bishkek, coordinated educational programs for teachers, and directed advanced courses on international human rights standards. She has also taught international law at Kyrgyz National University and has served as an independent election observer both in Norway and in Kyrgyzstan. Maria Lisitsyna, Masha, is the project manager on legal remedies for torture for the Open Society Justice Initiative. At the Justice Initiative, she focuses on litigation and advocacy on behalf of torture victims from Central Asia, as well as technical assistance programs for local lawyers and NGOs. Prior to this, she served as a Central Asia researcher at Human Rights Watch, focusing on civil and political rights in Turkmenistan, the rights of Uzbek refugees, and the rights of migrant workers in Russia and Kazakhstan. A human rights defender from Kyrgyzstan, Masha co-founded and worked for more than 10 years at the Youth Human Rights Group. In 2005, she served as a member of Kyrgyzstan's Constitutional Council, the body convened to work on constitutional amendments. She was a Regan-Fascell Democracy Fellow and dearly beloved by us all in 2004. We will now turn the floor over to Nadira, who will speak for approximately 35 minutes, followed by Masha for about 10 minutes. For those of you on Twitter, you can follow this presentation and contribute to the conversation by using the hashtag NEDEvents or by following the endowment at NEDemocracy. If you have not already done so, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. And finally, let me take this opportunity to thank staff members Melissa Ayton, Xerxes Spencer, Ashley Walburn, Sukanya Banerjee, Hillary Collins, Dean Jackson, and most especially Research Associate Sarah Amin for their help in organizing today's event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally, for this warm introduction, and thank you everybody for coming today to my presentation. Before I start my presentation, I would like to thank the National Endowment for Democracy particularly the International Forum for Democratic Studies, for this opportunity to be part of this fellowship program and to present my work here today. I have had a great time here, not least due to the wonderful staff of Regan-Fascell Democracy Fellow programs, particularly Sally, Xerxes, Melissa, Ashley. And I want to thank especially my research assistant, Sarah Amin, who played a major role in my research. I also want to thank my fellows, colleagues here at the program from whom I learned a lot and who enriched my time here. And lastly, I want to thank Masha, who came from New York, and I'm glad to have with us here today. My today's topic is democracy and reconciliation in Kyrgyzstan, a case for the mobilization of youth, and I think which is very important for Kyrgyzstan. My presentation will consist of 4 parts. In the first part, I will provide a general overview of Kyrgyzstan political transitions and ethnic tensions. In the second part, I will discuss challenges and successes experiences by youth during the 2005 and 2010 change of government, about national youth policy and the experience of my organization working with youth issue. In the third part, I will talk about ethnic tension and focus on good examples of youth initiatives in the reconciliation in post-conflict peace-building efforts. And finally, I will offer some general recommendations for the government, international community, and NGO, non-governmental organizations working with youth. And I will start by introduction. Here is a map of my country. Kyrgyzstan has a population of 5 million people and is located in Eurasia continent, bordering with China and 3 former Soviet republics of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Bishkek, located in the north, is the capital and largest city. And the second largest city is Osh, which is located in the southern Fergana Valley near of border of Uzbekistan. According to the official census of 2012, the main ethnic groups consist of 72% Kyrgyz, 14% Uzbeks, and 7% of Russian, followed by much smaller percentage of dozens of other ethnicities. And I would like to mention here that in the southern Kyrgyzstan, ethnic Uzbek represent more than 50% of the population in some years. In the last 9 years, Kyrgyzstan has experienced enormous political changes. In these years, the rise of ethnic nationalism became more evident, and the country saw its first violent conflict between the Kyrgyz and representatives of other countries' ethnic minorities. The largest and deadliest clashes happened in June 2010 between Kyrgyz and Uzbeks in the south of the country. There are conflicting reports of the possible role of government officials, the army, and police in the clashes, and details continue to emerge. In post-2010 conflict Kyrgyzstan, the discriminatory approach by the authorities against Uzbek, combined with strong ethnic nationalism expressed by some Kyrgyz politicians, makes the reconciliation processes is extremely difficult. And today it's older people, so-called aksakals, who are expected to lead the reconciliation processes. But it's important to recognize the role of young people, both in the conflict itself and in the reconciliation. And it is crucial now to address the the reconciliation in the forums and language used by youth, including social media, universities, and initiative groups. And I will start by introduction. The population of Kyrgyzstan, as Sally already mentioned, under 28 account for 60% of the general population. Social and economic problems such as unemployment, the low quality of education, limited career options remain unresolved. After independence in 1991, young people were not prioritized by the state and they were not involved in the state's strategic plans for building the country. Traditionally, in Kyrgyzstan, youth have been perceived as incompetent and unable to participate meaningfully in the ongoing process in the country. But this situation changed dramatically through 2005 and 2010, when many young people realized that they had opportunity to participate in the development of democracy in Kyrgyzstan. And in view of these changed political and social realities, young people are becoming more active and need positive political support for engagement in decision-making processes in Kyrgyzstan. There was a dramatic increase in youth political participation preceding the 2005 uprising, which ousted the first Kyrgyz president. During the 2005 revolution, youth movement played an important role in the mobilizing large number of young people in Kyrgyzstan. Youth activists took part in protests and they showed they were not afraid to express their opinion and positions. One example of civil youth movement created in 2005 was Kelkel, you can see on the pictures, which united against the violation of electoral right of young people and as support of the change of government. And it is understood that to be a real movement of committed young people acting for a change. And I remember that it was surprising for us that young people, many of them not previous involved in any formal organization, will be quite well organized and so active. Their activities focused on mobilizing students, publishing and distributing leaflets, and informing students on electoral violation and ongoing events. During the protest in 2010 that ousted President Bakiyev in April 2010, many young people were injured and killed when government used indiscriminate fire. There were some youth movement created around, mostly after the ousting of the president, demanding to make sure that the new government hears the voices of young people and takes their opinion into account. Following the change of the government, many leaders of this youth movement joined political parties. Well, in principle, it would have been great to have reformist young people in power, but unfortunately, these political parties were no different from the previous one, since they did not have any clear agenda for democratic ideas and reforms. And the youth movement in 2010 was very different from the youth movement of 2005. Because in 2005, the main focus of youth movement was to seek democratic changes, improve human rights situation, and expose corruption and nepotism. The leaders were inspired by non-violence revolution in Bosnia and later in Georgia and Ukraine. Contrary to this, in 2010, it seems the main goal of many of young leaders was to launch their political careers and not too much supporting democratic ideas. But what is important to note that the youth had a significant role to play in both uprisings in Kyrgyzstan. But however, despite these roles, the youth has never fully delegated powers in Kyrgyzstan. Youth movement formed before the revolution in 2005. They later transformed into a youth non-governmental organization. And it was a rational choice for them, as it will be hard to be a movement or a new political party if they didn't want to depend on private sectors, leaders, and established parties. Few individual leaders for the movement went into politics or joined government. And I interviewed one of the key leaders of Kel movement who shared with me with his frustration that as soon as the movement achieved its goals, it lost its unity because the change of government was the single idea that motivated many activists. And there were many attempts by various politicians to transform Kel into the political party. But the majority of this movement were against such transformation, as they wanted to remain a youth organization. They registered as a youth organization and worked for 2 years after the revolution 2005. And there were expectations that Kel would initiate reforms, but it didn't come true. Efficient as it was a movement, a majority of student members did not have the capacity or experience to develop reforms proposals or engage in long-term institutional advocacy. And at the moment, active young people in Kyrgyzstan, I think, are somewhat polarized because one part of young people, and many of them studied abroad, some work in NGO or international organizations, advocates for democratic changes and support the rule of law principles. They organize discussion clubs, participate in humanitarian projects, socially oriented businesses. And on the other hand, young supporters of ethnic nationalism are growing in strength and number. And I think in this situation in Kyrgyzstan, now we need to work on both sides on the spectrum by supporting young people who are pro-democracy and while also proactively engage with those on the side, either trying to find some common ground, but also proactively challenge the nationalistic rhetoric. As of government response, the representatives of state agencies are often discuss the importance, the issue of young people. And the creation of Ministry of Youth Affairs was a way to declare that the government cares. Since 2010, there were talk about of adopting a national youth policy, which was supposed to be a comprehensive and systematic approach addressing problem of young people. The draft policy paper would recognize youth as one of the most important resources for the development in the country. It will also provide for extensive work on informing the public about the problem of young people and involving all stakeholders in addressing this issue. But unfortunately, the youth policy has not yet adopted by the parliament. And in the context of Kyrgyzstan, developing such legislation for addressing problem of young people is an important step, because while grassroots initiatives have jointly contributed to the improvement of the situation so far, the existence of such legislation will help to eliminate many bureaucratic obstacles. And it also encourage different government agencies to take specific action to benefit the young people. And in light of this lack of meaningfully government response, civil society organizations shoulder the greatest responsibility in addressing youth issue across different regions in Kyrgyzstan. And I would like to share some example of my organization, the Youth Human Rights Groups. Since 2006, my organization has been working with young people in all regions of Kyrgyzstan to develop human rights protection mechanisms. We assisted to initiative groups to address issues at the local level. We provide training to high school and university students to enable them to implement mini projects on corruption, access to information, and transparency. The program increased activism among young people and motivated a new generation of human rights defenders. And the success of youth initiative groups led to the creation of student union that challenged university to develop more transparent policies. But what was clear from the activity of the initiative groups that the youth in all regions had similar problems. And to address this common converse, in 2011, initiative groups formed the National Student Human Rights Movement to continue the dialogue on youth issues at the national level. They reached out to the media and advocacy organizations to launch the new movement. An opportunity to be heard and to strengthen their footprint was a powerful intensive for young people to join force and to achieve significant results in protection of their rights. And to be effective in long term, they need still ongoing assistance from non-governmental organizations as well as some openness from the government. And I would like to thank NET colleagues for their commitment to our project that have fostered the participation of young people in human rights protection for more than 10 years. Moving on the ethnic conflict and reconciliation, I would like to say that in southern Kyrgyzstan, the relationship between the Uzbek and Kyrgyz communities were always fragile. There are number of opinions cause of 2010 conflict. One is that for a long time, the state did not pay attention to the increasing division between Kyrgyz and Uzbeks. The two ethnic groups grew apart in connection to many areas, including that of business, language, information, and place of residence. And as a result, large number of young people from each ethnic groups have been raised in relative isolation from each other. And currently, the government does not have effective mechanism to protect minorities from acts of intolerance, hatred, and hostility of ethnic ground. Because since 2010, there have been reports of illegal detention, extortion, and harassment of Uzbeks by police. Additionally, trial after the 2010 interethnic conflict has been characterized by injustice and ethnic bias. Non-governmental organizations that monitored the trials declared that 91% of defendants are ethnic Uzbek, 7% are Kyrgyz, and 2% are of other ethnicities. Problematically, in 2010 post-conflict Kyrgyzstan, the Uzbek language is being eliminated from the media space. Two Uzbek language television channels and newspapers were closed in 2011 and 2012. In addition, the number of Uzbek language schools has decreased from 128 to 91 since the conflict, which means that they have a fewer and fewer opportunities to receive education in the minority language. In higher education institutions, there had been a sharp reduction of number of students enrolled in Uzbek language program since 2010 after the ethnic conflict. Since 2010 conflict, active young users of social media independently create the informational campaign "I Want Peace in Kyrgyzstan" on Facebook and Twitter. The main aim of this group was to monitor and respond on information on ethnic conflict in local and foreign media. It is also monitored delivery of humanitarian aid and organized radio and television interviews calling for peace. Several other youth organizations also conducted awareness raising campaign designed to promote solidarity among citizens of Kyrgyzstan and regardless of ethnicity. This fostered a sense of shared responsibility for the conflict among all sides through social networks, blogs, and forums. Additionally, student human rights movement held peaceful demonstration in support of reconciliation and interethnic tolerance in all regions in Kyrgyzstan. Students, the media, non-governmental organizations, and representatives of various cultural centers, Turkish, Kazakh, Uzbek, Korean, were represented. Furthermore, a group of young journalists also wrote an article on success stories about interesting mixed happy families and about Kyrgyz and Uzbek people who helping each other to survive during the interethnic conflict in order to show positive attitude and relationship between Kyrgyz and Uzbeks. But despite of these progressive efforts, there is still a need for the long-term strategies that promote diversity and inclusions in Kyrgyzstan. And I would like to mention a number of the recommendations for the governmental and government of Kyrgyzstan, non-governmental organizations, and international community. For government of Kyrgyzstan, they shall adopt the national youth policy that will not only provide for the general principle of participation of young people in decision-making processes, but also to establish specific mechanism for it. Adopt formal channels for the active involvement of ethnic minorities in decision-making and create political space for the new generation of leaders from each ethnic group. Promote a multilingual society where people from different backgrounds can study and work in different languages. Reform primary, secondary, and higher education that incorporates more human rights and diversity-oriented content into the curricula across all grade levels. And we need to support also of international communities. Government representatives of the United States, the European Union, and other countries should formally discuss and support the development of public policies that more effectively engage young people in political decision processes in Kyrgyzstan. Government representatives should, at highest possible level, raise concerns about ethnic discrimination and encourage focused efforts to promote inclusions. And The first task could include education on minority language and minorities' access to public services. As about for local non-governmental organizations, continue to promote youth participation and social and political life by creating exchange programs with United States and European youth organizations that focus on leadership skills. Educate young people on new media technologies and their usage by opening small computer labs in the rural area of the country. Create and support campaigns to raise awareness about human rights and conflict resolution through the media and including social media. And in the conclusions, I would like to say that youth can and should be a vital force in Kyrgyzstan reconciliation in decision-making processes. And I hope that a reflection on the present challenges and successes of Kyrgyz youth activists will help us strategize for the future. Thank you.
Nadira, thank you very much for that overview of the promise and challenges for youth in supporting ethnic reconciliation and developing democratic institutions in Kyrgyzstan. My congratulations to you. We will now turn the floor over to Maria Lisitsyna, who will give her comments. Thank you, Masha.
Thanks, Sally. It's a hard topic, and I don't work anymore specifically only on young people, but I would like to come back to something that Nadira said. We are a very young country, which basically means that in most of the problems, like probably young people and very often young men will be among the most affected. I tried to count. Interestingly, in many of the analyses, there were so many reports written about the June violence. We couldn't find, and Nadira and I both looked, we couldn't find how many of young people were both the victims or are being tried for allegedly committing, whether they did or not, crimes. So I tried my best. You should be proud. That was it. So please bear with me if there might be some margin of error in my counting, but the organization that is called Kalim Shami, headed by a known human rights defender, Aziz Abjarsulova, gathered the list of the victims who were killed during the violence, which is about 1,470 people. So according to this, like very serious document, right? I counted about 235 under the age of 35, and about 130 of them under the age of 25, which includes kids. So exactly half of people who were killed were the young people, which probably we'll come back to that later. When you think about the reconciliation, it's like families lost their kids, right? It's a lot. It's not just lost family members, it's lost the kids. And if you also think that people tend to marry very young in Kyrgyzstan, and especially Uzbek community is quite a conservative community, where there is a lot of pressure on young men and women to marry. It's like many of them would be already parents of the kids when they lost their lives at that age. And when I was doing it, I read recently something called sunk cost effect. I'm like, okay, you can stop, okay, it's enough. You see the trends and you are just continuing because you started and not because it shows anything anymore. That people marry young probably also affected how they behave during the conflict. Because I was thinking about it, it's like how all these 25 years olds just went to these barricades. Why did you hide them? But they're not kids anymore. They're again young fathers who should protect their families. So if we are we know them a lot of anecdotes of very young people who had to fight in one way or another, or at least trying to build these barricades protecting their families. When we turned a little bit, and for sure they were arrested, and They have no lawyers, and lawyers could not work. Our also colleagues from Kalim Shami and independent human rights group monitored the trials that are related to the June events, and we have information on age in about 102 of them. So 66 convicted, more than a half is under 35. 30 of them are under 25. And at least 34 are convicted to life imprisonment. We unfortunately were not able to find, because also it's a bit harder to find all the verdicts, so I can't tell you exactly how many, but we definitely know the stories of 18, 19, 20, 22-year-olds getting life imprisonment. That's how shattered it is of families' lives and these people's lives. It's hard to imagine. Out of 172 convicted by the 2012, beginning of 2012, I believe, 12 were ethnic Kyrgyz. All other were ethnic Uzbek, and I think one was other nationality in Uyghur. So it's sort of hard when we speak about the reconciliation. I don't think that we can talk about it without speaking about accountability. And a lot of local and international organizations are calling for the review of all the cases that are related to the violence. And I think it's a very important call and very important to support it, because every family in the South is affected. It's the spillover effect of this. We now have some of the people who joined human rights movement, some of my colleagues, some came as an interns, who are from the South of different ethnicities, and who did business law, who never thought, and they're saying straightforward, I would never think I would come anywhere close to these human rights organizations who are screaming, God knows what they're doing, God knows who pays them, etc., etc. And getting it into your family, having to hide, or seeing it happen to your neighbors. We do have also, I wouldn't say that there are a lot, is of these younger activists who are joining the movement, which is for the sad reasons, but good that this is happening in this sense. I don't know, honestly, can we believe the statistics anymore? Most of young Uzbek men left the country. They all gone to Russia. Few gone to Uzbekistan, but if you're a young Uzbek man, you are not staying in the south of Kyrgyzstan now. It's it's only if you can't go. There are problems. There was on one hand, they could be lucky because Russia and Kyrgyzstan for a long time had a bilateral agreement on the simplified procedure of getting the citizenship. So a lot of people of whatever ethnicity, not only ethnic Russians repatriating, could get Russian citizenship pretty fast, paying way less bribes than you should normally pay. It was sort of this cheaper procedure, how you can get it. So a lot moved to Russia, and the only way to stay there, because anybody tried to get a Russian work permit, it's impossible, right? It's impossible for people with education, etc. It's very hard. The only way for you to stay there legally is to get the citizenship, whether you want it or not. Which brings us to the case okay, they're gone, and as you know, often the diasporas, because you don't have to live anymore with your neighbors, the wounds are even stronger. We all know that often on a very conflicting issues, people who don't live in the country tend to have much stronger opinions than people who still have to deal with their neighbors of different ethnicity, etc. So now there's a huge, I don't know how we can work on reconciliation without working in Russia, without working with these people who are gone, but who are they're the only income of their families. They are definitely respected, affected, and we don't know the numbers, because it's all very shady, but it's an important issue for us to discuss. There were issues, government, I would like to move a little bit to the role of the government up to today in some broad, probably somewhat unfair strokes. And probably we'll start from the end. Government did pay the compensation to the families affected, small, not huge compensations. Also, people of Uzbek ethnicity also got the compensations in general, except if you're not a Kyrgyz citizen. So a lot of wives and kids of people who left to Russia, or whatever ethnicity they would be, did not get anything. They are not getting the compensations because like the man is not a citizen, they don't know how to go, they don't know how to get it, I don't know what their own citizenship would be. So that creates also the economic issues around it as well, because they had to leave. Nadira spoke a lot about the informational sphere, and it's scary now. You know, it's like you read, probably many people who follow Kyrgyzstan know our human rights defender, Tolokan Ismailova, was recently detained on Uzbek border and sent back to Kyrgyzstan, deported. So there were news, and look, we are, like, as unfortunately or whatever, just a fact, we are from the Russian-speaking community reading Russian-speaking news. So and Russian-speaking news tend to be more or less informing about what happened to Tolokan. And you read the comments, which are many. And so many of them are like, okay, here she got it, like all these people, they should arrest her and keep her there, etc., etc. There are like dozens of them on a major website, and the article is not calling for any hatred at all. Then you have some like young lady who says, stop it, she's our human rights defender, we should support her. The response goes, do you know that she supported the Uzbeks during the June events, or whatever they call it? Oh no, I didn't know, I'm sorry, yes. Like they detained her for a good reason. And I mean, we all should take the blame. What do? I read it, I swear, right? I won't swear. I was asked not to swear into microphone, so I won't do that. But like, I express my opinions in whatever terms, close the computer and go, right? There are so many of them that I feel like, am I ready to like engage into that debate? But if we don't, all of us don't engage into that debate, it's like that's what the opinions of people who read in it, that's kind of opinions they're forming. It's what's the last joke? What was it? Saturday Night Live? When the rich person says like, this is unacceptable, I'll call my senator. A less rich person says, this is unacceptable, I'll write to my representative. And the poor person says, this is unacceptable, I'll scream at the TV. Right? So, I mean, this is unacceptable, I scream at the computer, I go. We need to really like think about it. And I'm really struggling because I am very, very pro-free speech. I think we need still some editorial policies. I don't want the Ministry of Youth to like introduce a formal censorship, don't get me wrong. But as a self-organization of media organizations, to at least look at the best practices of editorial policies. And I invite people in the room to comment on that, because this is not what I would know. Is it like, do you have to take out some of the comments? Do you have to make sure that you call on people to express different opinions? Because even the Russian language, like the comment area, is very worrisome. And the Kyrgyz language press is like straightforward calls for ethnic hatred. We now have, and not only ethnic hatred, it's unfortunately like happens, we now have a case of a young guy who is gay, who was arrested and tortured by the police. So like dirty articles on him when he challenged the police were in Kyrgyz language press, which for sure missed, right? We just, like, much later we found it and what kind of opinions were created. So coming to the, and Sally, please stop me at any time, because I can't just go on. Coming to the role of the government a bit.
Yes, please, finish your remarks.
For sure, government could do more to prevent the conflict. There were so many, and Nadira showed so many of smaller scale conflicts that happened, whereas the government did nothing on prosecuting the offenders, on publishing information about the true nature of the conflict. There was the conflict started on June 10th, the big one, but there was a big road rage on June 4, when an ethnic Uzbek driver hit a young Kyrgyz boy on a bicycle, and you know how it happens with the bicyclists. And he got beaten up by the mob, and then he was arrested and died in detention without getting any support. And again, all this information that is spread by whatever measures, there was never an investigation into the case and what really happened, and this fueled a lot of conflict. There were arms distributed. Again, colleagues of Hilem Shami found at least 25 incidents when arms were, like the rifles, etc., were either taken by the mob or given to people. All of them include people of Kyrgyz ethnicity. The government did fire. It's very much contested how much and who. And for sure, what Nadira mentioned, it's all, and while the role of the government is disputed during the conflict, we all see that after the active stage of the conflict, the government just went on the side of the one group. Right, the torture of the Uzbeks, how like, lawyers were beaten up in courtrooms, judges were getting threats, and the government just did nothing. We have a written reply of a judge for a lawyer complaint who was beaten up in the courtroom that says, oh, if we only had a service of court wardens, these things would not be happening. They're not even hiding. Now there is, and you, probably everybody who follows Kyrgyzstan heard about a case of Azimjan Askarov, our friend, a human rights defender of Uzbek ethnicity, who was monitoring the violence, got accused of, basically the police settled scores with him, got accused of inciting violence and calling to kill some policemen, and is now serving the life imprisonment. And he was tortured. He is a 60-something years old man. He was badly beaten. He thought he wouldn't leave. He tried 2 suicide attempts as well in pretrial detention. Like the whole world was speaking on his behalf, and the government just says we can't do anything because the mob, basically like there will be demonstrations, we will be out of here, we can't release him. Nobody even, in private conversations or like in more informal, everybody understands that he is just like got caught into this. Well, after the conflict, there was a lot, and again, the young, and especially young men, will be the one targeted. So there would be some like people knocking on your door and saying, if you don't give me $5,000 now, I'll say that I've seen you at Sanpa. And Sanpa was the most brutal incident where Kyrgyz people were killed. I will not go into details now, but it really happened, and it was very brutal and poor victims. So the extortion by whomever, not even as a government or anyone formal, is basically knock on any door of like ethnic Uzbek, says, I'll say I've seen you in Sanpa. The witness evidence is enough to convict you for life imprisonment. You pay me as much. That's, our colleagues in the south say that this is stopping now, but now the government starts going individually again after the activists. Our friend from organization called Spravedlivas, who is member of the World Movement for Democracy and a net grantee, one of their younger lawyers, who is ethnic Uzbek, got several times called now to the National Security Service. And so far he's been interrogated as a witness. But they tell him that we'll make you an accused of the like corruption crimes related to some Uzbek businessmen pretty fast if you don't stop your human rights activities. It's pretty unnoticeable when you look from it from international or even from the capital. It's like the two worlds. But these tendencies, unfortunately, are continuing. I'll stop here and we can discuss, but I think we can come back. I agree with Nadira's recommendations and we can come back to that in the discussion.
Yes. Thank you, Masha. You have shown us how important Nadira's recommendations for short and long-term strategies to address this terrible situation is. And I'd like to invite the audience for comments, for questions. We have microphones. If you could identify yourself. This lady right here, we could begin with her. And then we will have responses from Nadira and from Masha. So thank you.
Hi, Catherine Ferguson. I'm wondering if you could comment on youth human rights groups' activities in the reconciliation effort, and also wondering what specific guidance you would give to international organizations in the post-conflict reconciliation and what their focus might be.
Okay, so the work of the Youth Human Rights Group on reconciliation and your recommendations for the international community, is that right?
Thank you for this important question. Because international pressure is one of the, I think, main tools to advocate. Because international pressure, I think, is one of the main tools to advocate for change in the country. And I think that international organizations should pay more attention on human rights situation. They should work more with they should monitor the failed trial and work more with local authorities, especially in the south of Kyrgyzstan, because now people don't trust to local authorities, and the lack of trust prevails in all society of Kyrgyzstan. And the question of access to justice, security, I think it's the main questions in the south. And as for young people, I think the international organization should more support civic education programs, because before 2005, it was a lot of support of international organization, like in civic education, and it was a lot of resource centers in the regions where young people can join and discuss different problem of young people, and it was helpful also not for young people but also for non-governmental organizations. I think on civic education they should more support with working with young people. As of reconciliation activities of my organization, I think that we don't have activities specific like to reconciliation processes, and I'm here to learn about reconciliation processes of different countries. And one of my research topic here is to find some best practices that can be adopted to Kyrgyzstan. But my organization work more on policy level, because we prepare after 2010 ethnic conflict, we participated in the investigation with coalition of 10 human rights organizations. We conducted interview and collected information. This information we wrote in report and disseminated among international organizations. And this information we also include to different alternative report to UN committee on different UN committee treaty bodies. And recently in February of this year, we participated in presented alternative report to Committee of Elimination Racial Discrimination. And most of recommendation about language, decrease of school in Uzbek language, decrease of students in higher education were included in conclusion of observation of the committee. And I hope that after my return to Kyrgyzstan, with my experience that I learned here about different best practices, I can implement. It's like my future plan to implement all of these activities with working with youth.
Maybe you would like to tell us a little bit about the best practices that you did learn from. I know that you were looking at the Latin America region and the Balkan region.
Yeah, at cost of limited time, like during my presentation, I didn't include like best practices. I met here with different organizations who have program on peace and peace building efforts in DC, in New York, and also I was in California. It was also helpful. I met with Conflict Resolution African Center in the university. And it was like civil society reconciliation efforts was interested for me especially in the Balkans. They work on creating connection between majority and the minority groups, communities, especially in Serbia. And like-minded NGO in Serbia, they created events where majority groups showed public support to minority groups. And I think that this built confidence of to Bosnia and Kosovo minorities to Serbian organization, to NGOs and Serbian organization. And for Kyrgyzstan, I think it will be also good example of establishment of trust between minority groups and civil society organizations. Another regions that I looked, it's Latin America, especially Guatemala and El Salvador. They use political theaters. I think it's very interesting, political theater to represent and teach the situation to teach about historical violence and to prevent and bring all of different groups together. This in Kyrgyzstan, it will be like they bring together for reconciliation purposes. This practice, I think, will be also helpful for Kyrgyzstan to teach Kyrgyz youth about civic engagement. But it was like a lot. I think that upon my return, I can also like to find like.
And you had mentioned sports.
Also, yes, sports. In some countries, sports, it's a very good activity to join and to bring youth together.
Mm-hmm. Theater, sports.
Theater, sports, yeah. Popular educations.
Mm-hmm. I see hands are going up, so we will take a few more questions. How about this gentleman, this lady, and then over there? We'll take those three, and then we'll move to the back. So.
Mitchell Pullman. I've worked as a long-term elections observer in Kyrgyzstan for the OSCE, and I was there a couple of years ago. And if I remember correctly, the law in Kyrgyzstan was such that young people below a certain age were not permitted to volunteer or be involved in political campaigns. And I know that Kyrgyzstan is not alone in having those laws. A number of countries have those laws, and they're well-intentioned, designed to prevent pressure being brought to bear on students. But still, if you're talking about the importance of civic engagement, creating a civil society, really the best form of civic education is to encourage young people to work on behalf of politicians, political parties that they believe in, and engage their fellow citizens in political discussion. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. We'll maybe take another couple of questions.
I'm Megan Haddock. I'm from the Johns Hopkins Center for Civil Society Studies. And my question is much broader in scope, taking a real step backwards, I guess. And that is, to what degree do you see the youth that you work with and the youth that you see involved in organizations engage in civil society activities later as they get older? And is it something that they do in their youth and then stop participating in when they finish at the university or get married? Are they going into careers in civil society or volunteering for nonprofit organizations, or is it something they really stop being involved in later on?
Okay.
And if they're stopping, I guess what's the barrier?
And one here, and then I see there are other hands, but we'll take three at a time. And yes.
I'm Lila Miller. I'm from the American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative. I work on the Kyrgyzstan programs there in particular. And I wanted to ask more about engaging youth, and particularly you're talking about the dichotomy between youth who are very focused on civil society and civil development and this increasing nationalistic trend. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on areas that you saw as safe spaces to engage people on these issues and a way to combine, polar opposites into a productive conversation.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The first was about the law that perhaps young people couldn't be involved in campaigns if they were out of age, and then the importance of them engaging.
in 2010, we have a quote now for 15% for youth political parties to participate in
In political campaigns,
political
elections.
And youth political parties, they participated in elections in parliamentarian elections in 2010. But unfortunately, they didn't get any minimal percentage because most of сказать, что они предел они не прошли.
Didn't make the limit.
Yeah, and they didn't make real limits.
They didn't reach the threshold to participate.
Yeah, to participate.
Was there an age limit on how old you had to be to participate? Masha's trying to find it on her iPhone.
Because, like, you know, we have some limits for the candidates, right? You cannot be younger than 35 years old to run for president, these things. But you say even supporting the campaigns, right? I didn't hear about that.
For volunteering for a campaign.
It's like anyone under the age of like 18 cannot like volunteer for a party or a candidate. And of course, you know, we don't have any such limits here, but in some countries they do.
Volunteer, yeah.
We're not sure about that.
Yeah,
But I think your point is well taken, and his point is that a wonderful way to engage youth is to have them volunteer, and so one would hope that they would be allowed to do so.
Yeah, it will be like good way to participate young people in
very positive way.
Yeah, positive.
I have to say, when I was in Kyrgyzstan, I was impressed that
there is
quite a bit of interest on the part of young people in politics in Kyrgyzstan. It's quite genuine, and I was quite impressed by it. But it seems as if there are like legal blocks, you know, that make it impossible for young people. I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but in our society, of course, it's quite common for 15, 16-year-old kids to go out and pass out literature and on behalf of a candidate or a party, and that's, you know, really the best way to get young people involved in a democratic society.
Thank you. So the next question had to be, do the young people remain involved in their careers?
I think because of practice of me, for example, with Masha, we started to work in human rights organization where we were 18 years old. And now we are like more than 30 years old. And we are still in civil society organization. And I think for most of like human rights defenders in young people who are involved in civil society, they're still working in civil society. I don't know, like
it's a good way for
I
them
don't know
to
experience of anyone
that dropped out.
Yeah, some go to politicians. Yeah, some, but it's a few of young people who are like in governmental structure, politicians, but more of human, like young people who started with us in the same age of, in the same years of our organization, they are still in civil society and civic work.
So it seems like a very good way to get involved and stay involved. This leads.
But yeah, unfortunately, that a lot of young people just left country to Europe, United States, just for education. But we hope that they will come back and can do like democracy, real democracy in Kyrgyzstan.
Well, this leads also to the next question, which was that you did mention that some young people are involved in nationalistic tendencies, and they asked about the safe space to bring people together to have a dialogue about the need for reconciliation, yet these issues of nationalism what are those safe spaces that you see where youth can come together and talk about these issues?
I think it's only way to organize some. It's hard to say because like when some few of nationalistic young people who demonstrate nationalistics, but it's maybe to organize some space for all young people who are for democratic ideas and to try to get a dialogue with them.
Nadira, I think you did mention schools. You also have mentioned theater and sports. So I think these are some of the areas that she's touching on as she looks at how to promote reconciliation there. So student conversations, theater,
Students,
political
schools,
theater.
political theaters, yeah. And we had some discussion clubs. Also, it's very popular discussion clubs. Social media, I think it's one of the good tools because during ethnic conflict, revolutions, social media, and I think that new media technology is one of the achievement of young people in Kyrgyzstan because during this all of events they used a lot and they create campaign, they shared information by, and I think social media will be also a good tools for young people.
I think Masha might have something to say.
Yeah, and I think also, Nadir, right after the conflict, a number of NGOs organized camps for the kids from the south, including especially focused on those who lost their parents, because, like, again, a bunch of kids are now orphans, and that was mixed of different ethnicities, and I know that you participated on it. I think it has to be cross-regional. I mean, you can try local, you have to be very careful, and you have to work on it, like, if a joint event's organized on a very local level in the affected communities, you need to have people who will stay in these communities, who will be among the key organizers. You can't parachute in, organize something and go, because like the spillover of what will happen after, it's still pretty fragile. We don't have much of the events for the young people. It's unfortunate the country becoming more and more divided into north and south, and like Bishkek and Tazar. So I think this, like whatever format of the events, and probably like there can be camps, there can be discussions, there can be joint trips, there can be volunteering. There are many things that could take place also in person. I would imagine they should be on some other topics, not on the reconciliation, right? You want to organize something about, I don't know, advancement of science or like leadership skills, like all this leadership, which like I know a lot of it's an old school, etc. But the leadership camps, and it's all about the selection of participants because it's, as Nadira was speaking in her presentation, the communities are growing now even more apart. It's just about having that like few friends from the other ethnicities. So I think I would look a lot on the general programs and very, very careful selection of participants.
But unfortunately, when we conduct our training, we can see now in the south of the in the south, especially in Ocean, Jalalabad, few and fewer Uzbek students who participate our trainings because when they saw like human rights issue, it's hard for them. They're just afraid. And it was one example during our training in Jalalabad when one Uzbek student participated and he just was very angry and he just said like, Kyrgyz killed our family and we should kill also. Now, but during like after 3 days training, he just said like he was involved in the training, he listened all of topics and a lesson more, but it's general situation in Kyrgyzstan, like in for the south, that fewer and fewer students participate in activities.
Thank you. All right, may I see the hands again? Went up. Okay, these two here, and then two there.
Thank you. My name is Jitman Basnet from Nepal, and at the moment I'm a fellow at NED. I wanted to ask you about the transitional justice system, how you are dealing with after, as Maria said, the June incidents and the trial. So how the transitional system, like Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, other trials, and prosecutions, how it's going on? What is the latest development?
Okay, thank you, Jitman. The lady behind.
My name is Aslı Gürkan. I'm with the World Bank, working in the Central Asia region. My question was about the role of religion in terms of both, ethnic violence, ethnic tensions, and reconciliation. Because on the one hand, you could think of Islam as something that's cross-cutting among Kyrgyz and Uzbek communities. It could potentially play a positive role, or it could be a way of exacerbating violence. So how is that playing out? Does that play a role at all? Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Asel Mukashkalieva. I'm from Kazakhstan, political science student. My question is, do young people discriminate on ethnic basis to these days? Are tensions continuing? And what does the newly elected government do about it? Do they work on decreasing tensions and reestablishing trust among Uzbeks and Kyrgyz? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And then there was a hand there.
Safo Javorov, visiting fellow at Elliott School of George Washington University. Thank you, Nadira, for your informative presentation, and I would like to congratulate you with accomplishing your research too. My question is a bit different from the others today. I would like to know about the role of employment or unemployment among youth in these conflicts, or in case of mobilization of youth or reconciliation of Kyrgyzstan. So what do you think about youth unemployment and as a cause of this conflict, and youth employment or economic opportunity for youth as a reconciliation, as a potential reconciliation? Thank you.
Thank you all for your questions. Masha is going to take the first question about transitional justice. Are there any mechanisms, commissions?
Thank you for this question. So right after the event, there was a national commission that was supposed to look at the causes, and it was a very long name of the root causes and what happened during the event. Their report is seen as highly discredited, and one of our friends who was a member of the commission just left it. There was an international commission of inquiry that was called by then President Rosa Otunbayeva, who asked Klima Kylyunin from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe to head it. And the report is probably one of the key documents now at looking at the conflicts. The report can be also duly criticized, and probably there's no time to look into this. Like, for example, doesn't mention the Sanpa event where the Kyrgyz people were killed, like a major event. So, like, was called as that it was biased, which it probably wasn't. They just had big oversights. But our very nationalistic parliament designed Klima, the head of this commission, persona non grata. Also, they had like no powers to do so. They just like randomly issued a statement that the customs and the border control doesn't have to enforce, but they do. It's very strange. And the International Center for Transitional Justice actually came to Kyrgyzstan and did a report and recommended looking at the truth commissions, and advised us to look at the experiences of Peru and of Morocco. It's probably no time yet, because we can't, like the witnesses have to be able to come forward. And when now the trials continue and new charges are being brought, including against the activists, you can't imagine it to be safe enough space for witnesses to come forward. On here, I probably would come back to the first question. I think NGOs are doing very important work of monitoring continuously what happened then, because like a lot of details will continue to emerge for years now, and like trying to build a record, because we still hope that there will be transitional justice commission, but we don't see it coming anytime soon. The government is working on something called like a concept on ethnic relations, trying to define the governmental policy toward ethnic minorities. It's in the works. It might be even not bad, but like who knows how it will be implemented. And interestingly, the Prosecutor General Office created a special investigative unit within the Prosecutor General, following recommendations of many NGOs, to investigate abuse of office in the South. But it's only 4 people reporting directly to the Central Prosecutor's Office. And it's again, like most likely will be discredited pretty soon. So there are very, very small steps, and it will be justice delayed. We still hope there will be justice one day, but like it clearly will be very delayed.
Thank you, Masha. Nadira, we have the question on the role of religion and unemployment.
Thank you. I think role of religion organization, it's a hard question and very complex. Because I also tried here to find maybe some good practices to involve of religion organization, but I think in Kyrgyzstan it will be a little difficult, because on one hand, yeah, Uzbek and Kyrgyz are Muslims. And we have
Department on Religious Affairs.
Department on Religious Affairs who can play a major role in involvement of religion organization on reconciliation. But the problem that this department don't have a big influence and among populations. And we have also like different teaching different, but it's really we don't know how to reach out them to reconciliation, to our work, because they're in one hand they're close, and we don't know really how to work with these religion organizations.
Yes.
I think we have to accept, and it's lately been put to us as a reprimand, you know. Civil society is a very traditional civil society, human rights organization, very formed as very secular organizations. It's like Kyrgyzstan, and especially Bishkek, was a very secular place. Like some people for sure hold their beliefs, but religion never was an organizing principle for the groups. And that's probably changing, because especially in the South, people become like more and more adherent to like different parts of Islam, and we sort of really also just don't know how to engage. It probably might be quite interesting to see what the experience is. As we are sort of apart, and there is a distrust, like there is that like very deep distrust of what these organizations are doing, and some of them might be justified, some of them will not be justified at all. But we are coming to that now. We're coming to that like it's too big part of the civil society as well now. You can't just ignore all the like organizations, groups organized around religion. It's just one example that like going to the central, you know, we have like central Muslim authority, which is there was attempts to reach out to the Mufti of Kyrgyzstan on Askarov, our human rights defender who is in jail. Askarov is a devout Muslim. He became much more practicing in prison. And the very human rights defenders who went to the Mufti and told him about the case and asked him to raise it when he goes to the south. And the Mufti was just like basically told by the people in the south to go to hell. Like there was no discussion. We have this issue. Kyrgyzstan it's an interesting country in many aspects, but there are very few authoritative figures you can find. When our writer like Chingiz Aytmatov died, already also being compromised a bit, there is no, or again, people who could talk to the people of Kyrgyzstan of whatever ethnicity about any issues. Like Mufti is not an authority. Mufti is just a Mufti. A bunch of mob can tell him to go away, etc. So that's also what we are struggling with, because you would like to reach out to like key intellectuals, and there are people, but there's no nationally recognized one. And I know people from Kyrgyzstan in the room as well, so maybe you disagree.
Okay, let me move on with the other questions on. We had one about whether young people really discriminate against each other in this way, I think was the question you were asking at this moment. What is your view on that? And then on the role of the economy, of unemployment, employment, on their actions.
I think unemployment it's very high in Kyrgyzstan now, and I think in violence, great number of young people, especially unemployment people who participated in violence in Kyrgyzstan. I think it's a cause of also a lot of young people left to Russia, to work in Russia, Kazakhstan, because they don't have a job in Kyrgyzstan. And Russia, Kazakhstan, it's only one way to get to work there. And unemployment, no, God, it's, что пытаться их вовлекать уже больше в конструктивность.
Nadira was just saying that also there is a need to try and to integrate more young people into the government jobs and like government controlled structures.
Because for young people there is no opportunity there is no career opportunity in government structure, and I think it will be one of the way of unemployment in Kyrgyzstan, because a lot of young people now they more work in international organizations, NGOs, and NGOs for them it's just a regular work.
And the question on whether how do young people see each other? Do they discriminate against each other? How do you see that generational change happening? If I understood it correctly.
I think the discrimination question among young people it's only between like different ethnicities. It can be discriminated by Kyrgyz, Uzbek. It's more Kyrgyz and Uzbeks. It's a cause of like we have a lot of young people, nationalist young people now. It's discrimination can be only different ethnicities.
Thank you. Any further questions from the audience? Yes, here. Oh, 1 second for the perfect. Okay.
My name is Khadija and I'm from Libya. My question is, you spoke about reconciliation a lot, and Maria mentioned how you wanted some editorial control, you can call it control, over what's being posted by the media. Do you think that allows for the discussion needed for reconciliation and for people to speak to each other and understand one another in the presence of such control?
I'll let Masha explain what she was exactly meaning there.
If I use the word control, I'm sorry. And I did mean policies by the editors, right? I really don't want censorship, but I want editors of there's a big online presence now to sort of be mindful that a lot of comments are sometimes directly calling to violence, and at least be trying to respond. Right? I am saying that, like, I'm not sure what are the ways to deal with a lot of hatred to be poured into the communication space, and probably the best is let it pour into communication space, but proactively search if there are other opinions in the society. But I would be very interested on how, like, it dealt on US websites and others.
The question of hate speech or how one can respond to that. Any further questions from the audience, comments? Yes, sir, and here two last, shall we? And unless there's anybody else, we will take these two, and a third. We'll take these last three, and then we'll.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. Anthony Boyer, International Foundation for Electoral Systems. Thank you very much for the presentations today. Very interesting. You spoke a lot about the conflict in the south, in Osh and Jalalabad particularly. What about, though, potential conflicts in Batken with the exclaves, Tajik and Uzbek populations? What can be done there to prevent something, given that it's more of a state-to-state relationship? Thank you.
Okay, yes, and the question just.
Yes, hello. I'm Catherine Hughes-Freytek with Peace Brigades International, and thank you very much for this. Basically, my question is similar to Jitman's. We work in many areas of the world that are kind of in post-conflict situations, and we help protect human rights defenders on the ground through a number of different ways. But we see that the whole issue, and what I'm hearing, I'm not a specialist in your country, but that the whole idea of justice has to come before reconciliation, that I think it's very important for the youth to be engaged, to try to work together, and it sounds like some very interesting things you're working on, but as long as the issues of justice are still there, I think that those are the core roots of some of the hatred and discrimination and issues going on, probably economic as well as others. And so I'm just kind of wondering what you can do with the youth or with the focus to focus on this justice piece and trying to come to some understanding and basic issues of moving forward, because I think it's going to be hard to do the reconciliation ahead of time.
Thank you. That's an important comment. And the third gentleman there, yes.
Hello, my name is Orgil and I'm from Mongolia. And I have a few questions about the legislation. First of all, I want to ask about the law of guns, because in my opinion, I think the government should do something like something about the counts of guns. There may be a way to get off the guns from the people, from the citizenship. Some like give them money and take them gun away in the public. And also, I hope there will be a better time in the Kyrgyzstan, and I wish the best.
Thank you very much. So we have three questions on the Tajik-Uzbek tensions, the issue of justice before reconciliation, and gun control.
About the situation with Tajik in the Balkan, I think it's the problem that the states in general don't have any mechanism to protect such a conflict. And the government, I think we don't have political will to permit solve conflicts, ethnic conflicts in Kyrgyzstan.
To talk about the justice issue and how.
Yeah, justice. I think justice is one of the important questions for security in general. For security not only for young people, but for all population in Kyrgyzstan. And it's a good comment, and have questions that we should work like on justice.
Yeah, very good. And Masha, do you have any comments on the justice issue, perhaps? No? And any comments on the gun control issue that was raised?
Actually, legislation in Kyrgyzstan doesn't provide for on the guns control. We don't have legislation allowing like anyone carry a gun. There are like hunters, right, who can carry a specific type of the hunting guns, and then there are like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these like private security agencies. So a lot of people are armed, and if you look at our parliamentarians, they all are like going. There's always like 2-3 guys around each of them who are armed. It's like you come to the parliament and you're like, whoo, like I really like. Sometimes I'm like afraid that there will be some like random shut out of them. But they all are somewhat regulated. You cannot. It's not like in the United States. What we when you like can't carry a gun. But we also don't trust our police to carry the guns, right? There's always a joke that the policeman gets a job, goes and they call him and say, like, come collect your salary. It's been a month. Oh, you don't only give a gun, you also give a salary. Like, wow. So that was it. So the abuse comes a lot from people who like legally like have specific powers to carry guns, and you couldn't take the guns away from the police, right, or from the military. There was a problem that the population illegally took the guns. That's what I was talking about. That there would be a mob of like 500 people coming to that with like one guy who was sitting in the tank or 10 of them, and they just disarmed. And out of that, 46% was, up to today, 46% of the arms that were lost got back from those that was given to the population, and 37% was recollected from what was like taken over. None of the ammunition. So whatever ammunition was gone, it's like hanging somewhere in Kyrgyzstan. Probably there are a lot of guns floating, but because we have no legislation, it's even harder to design the programs for that.
Well, I want to thank everybody for your questions and comments. We've had a discussion of a fairly sober situation, but I think that with your efforts, Nadira, with your commitment, Masha, you have shown us how over the past 10 years, youth movements have begun to coalesce and youth has become more involved in politics. And so we wish you very well as you return and in your efforts to engage youth in a positive direction in Kyrgyzstan. So please join me. Thank you.